Board to order.
Okay.
School board meetings are now open to the public, but the district will comply with Iowa Department of Public Health and the governor's recommendations as to gatherings and social distancing. To comply with the 6-foot distancing directive, the boardroom has been arranged to allow for 6 feet between attendees. However, as a result, it has the limit being placed on the number of individuals from the public who may attend in person. Capacity of the room for allowing for social distancing is 30 members of the public. Masks are to be required to be worn in the boardroom, but you may remove your mask if you speak. As with prior board meetings, you may access the board meeting remotely as well, but open forum will be in person only. Board priorities. I'd ask Director Klein-Jerome to please read the board priorities.
Okay, sorry, I'm. Okay. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Director Hayes, would you please read the mission and vision statement?
I'll be happy to. The mission statement enhances each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. The vision statement is education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now have a presentation by the Equity Committee. Jamie Walker-Salas, please.
Good evening. We're actually the Davenport Education Association Multicultural Committee. We're actually the Davenport Education Association Multicultural Committee. We'd like to start off today by recognizing the indigenous lands that we live on. We begin by acknowledging that we meet on traditional lands served by the Kickapoo people. In Iowa, we also recognize many other tribes, including but not limited to the Ochi, Shakawian, the Miami, Sauk, and Meskwaki. We honor America's first peoples, all elders, past, present, and emerging, and we call on to learn, share what we've learned about tribal history, culture, contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. The Multicultural Committee is a partnership between the Davenport Community Schools and the Davenport Education Association. We strive to support the success of all students, families, staff. We have a few representatives of our committee here today, and they'll just stand to be recognized. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Sarah McGlynn. I'm a National Board Certified Special Education teacher. I teach at Monroe Little People Special Ed K-1-2. I'm here as part of our committee representation. Our objectives that we have been working towards for the last couple of years and really digging deep since we had a little extra wiggle room during the COVID quarantine, we as a committee really dug in and did several book studies and looked at our white privilege and white fragility, as well as different ways that we can apply that information to school, or to our classrooms, excuse me. We've also done individually and collectively as a committee several conferences. We're constantly seeking out different learning opportunities, all at either minimal or no cost to us. Several of the authors of the books that we've written have been doing a lot of really great Q&As and webinars and things over the last several months. So we've been attending those, as well as collaborating with the curriculum department over the summer, where we had the awesome opportunity to create the equity innovator position and have a large seat at that table, as well as attending a lot of the community rallies and protests for Black Lives Matter and lots of the other community events that we have going on. In addition, we are working at moving forward in creating equity committees at every building. And that's several of them, including at Monroe, have already started, and we're meeting weekly. And our goal is to have that happening in every building, obviously sooner than later, and to have a kind of a collective voice coming from our committee in conjunction with the board and department, so that our messages stay unified and not like muddy down. We're also, one of the next big projects that we'll be pushing out are book studies, tied in conjunction with the teacher quality monies that we have had the opportunity to utilize before. We're hoping that the teachers will create book studies within their buildings and their circles of colleagues, and several of us will be running them. We're going to do one again with ourselves as our committee, but then also be leading them within our buildings as different learning opportunities. We've created a list that has been vetted, and we have provided like a teacher kind of a question and answer guide as we're like a book study guide going throughout those. So that's really the initiatives that we'd like to be pushing out going forward, and invite you to join any of us or your own book studies as well.
Good evening. I'm John Keeley. I'm president of the Davenport Education Association, and I've been a teacher in the district for 26 years. Systematic racism is an unethical national practice that must end. To quote Henry David Thoreau, "It is never too late to give up our prejudices." Thank you.
Sarah touched on just a bit of the creative solutions and practical actions that we've been working towards in encouraging cultural competency and responsive pedagogy throughout the district. Our committee has been working, like we said, over the last couple of years to educate ourselves, but to share what we've learned within our buildings as well as within the community. Currently, we have members who are working with the Davenport Police Department, the Bettendorf Police Department, as well as the Scott County Sheriff. We have also other grassroots organizations that are seeking grants and opportunities for students. Just recently, I assisted in winning a grant from Iowa State Education Association for historically Black colleges and universities with the Quad City Ambassadors. We're going to talk now about our ESL Community Network. But before I go, I want to make sure to introduce myself. My name is Jamie Walker Salas. I'm a 25-year veteran special education teacher, and I'm currently the TLCS Equity Innovator.
Hello, my name is Anne-Marie Tessier. I'm an ESL teacher at Buchanan Elementary and also assigned to Truman this year. One of our ESL teachers is currently working on building an ESL community with YMCA. So she's trying to develop some community partnerships to assist our students and our families. But not only our ESL families, but also our families who speak another language, but their children may not be in the ESL program. Some of the things that they've recently looked at were transportation, helping students get to the YMCA to work on some academic and content guidance with their homework. Also technology, hoping to provide some technology assistance if they don't have internet or devices in their home. Also some safe spaces for social and emotional support. So those are some things that that's currently in the works, and she's working on developing. Sounds like a great program. And that's it. Thank you.
Good evening. You guys say that back to me normally? Good day. Just kidding. Jabari Woods, Davenport Schools. Over the last couple of years, I've had the honor of working with this group on the areas that they mentioned tonight. We're really combining our efforts to make sure we're staying under the umbrella of the audit and its mandate. Groups like ALS, African American Leadership Academy, working with groups at Scott County Schools, working with the mayor, working with the city of Davenport. We're trying to aim at getting parents involved as a partnership with the Davenport schools. The goal is to get 100 parents trained through quad-city mediation to be able to deal with conflict resolution in their neighborhoods. So we're working together as a group, and under leadership of TJ, we're moving forward together. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation for this evening. Are there any questions from the board for us?
Director Gosa?
So you guys have committees set up in each, or you're looking to get committees set up in each building, and then I guess the superintendent might have to answer this. Is there a way for board members to be involved, or so that maybe when we do our board reports, we can give kind of a report or something like that? Is that
Absolutely. So currently what we're doing is we have a few buildings who have already started their equity work. We have other buildings who are just beginning, and so we have different stages throughout the district. So I'm sure that we can find one that is ready to go that would welcome you all to join. But through my equity innovator position, I'm currently going out to different buildings and working with them and their BSATs, and then we'll move towards the full equity committee.
okay? And then another question: has everyone that you've approached so far been very receptive to this? Have you had any kind of pushback?
I haven't had any pushback. We are on the agenda at different times. So one of the things, as you know, our teachers are really working hard on the return to learn and the hybrid and the online only. And so to make sure that students are getting everything that they need with that aspect of our curriculum, that's priority number one. And then we'll bring in the equity piece to make sure that we're getting all the needs met.
Thank you. I appreciate all you guys and gals' hard work.
Director Beck?
Thank you for coming tonight. Sorry, it got really loud. And for your presentation, I really appreciate it. And I echo what Director Gosa said. I think I personally, as a board member, would love to be involved more. I know I did a little bit over the summer with return to learn stuff, but this is something that's really important, I think, to all of us. And it's nice to see people see what's actually happening, and that we have you now in this position who can come up with some action steps that we can actually see directly impacting our students. I do have a couple of questions. Number one, board members, you can expect to see my board request about a book study again. Number two, sort of echoing what Director Gosa said, I know there have been some hurdles to making changes, particularly with respect to culturally responsive pedagogy. How has that happened? I know there's sort of occasionally there's some inertia, and it takes a while for the people who don't buy in to kind of get pushed to the side. I'm trying to think of how to say this diplomatically, but I think you know what I mean. How is that going? How have you, we're either going to bring people in, or some people are just going to end up.
I can't speak to what principals will do in their own individual buildings with staff that don't come on board to the goals of the district. That's out of my pay grade. But what I can say is that we're beginning, and we'll continue to focus on the why we do culturally responsive pedagogy. And I think by spending a little bit more time focusing on the why, it will help to garner people's support for doing this for all students, because all students will benefit and have gains from it.
Okay. And then my last question is, do any of our students, and I don't know, maybe you guys can speak to this, Ola and Meredith and Casey, but Do students get to participate in any of these committees, particularly, I say, at the high school level or the middle school level?
Christy Pitts is starting a student voice group at Central.
Okay.
And it's just, beginning with everything. We had to get term 0 out of the way. So that will be starting there soon.
Awesome, because I know students have a lot to say about what it feels like to be a student, and particularly a non-white student in the schools. And so I think it's important to listen to their voices. So anyway, that wraps up my questions for now. I'm sure I'll have more, but thank you so much for presenting and for all of you guys for what you're doing.
Jamie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now have student board reports.
I can go. Sorry. Sorry, I was finishing my notes. Anyways, it's
Pull it
lovely
a
to be
little
back. I'm just gonna jump right in.
Pull it a little closer.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Is that better? Awesome. So I want to start with the extension of the 0 term at the high school. I'm just giving it from a student perspective and just sort of how we experienced it as of yesterday and sort of what the general mood was. There was a lot of frustration, I think, and confusion, and I think a lot of that was due to a lack of clarity as to why, and I'm sure that there was obviously a very clear reason, otherwise it wouldn't have happened, as obviously most things do, but in just hearing stories of like how the staff meeting went and like what the reasons for it was just like, oh, 0 term is extended a week. We expect to see you back next week. What are we doing? Finals are over. And that's sort of where the frustration came in, because finals are over. What do we do now? There's no assignment. And so there was me in first period and all of my classmates, and we were like, okay, our class is over and our teachers have to come up with this week of work now. So what are we doing next week? So I know there are some teachers that are coming up with really creative solutions to the problem too, but there are some other teachers that have to grade finals over the weekend, and there are other teachers that have other things that they already had planned, and I don't know really what next week is going to look like, or this week I guess now. But there was just a lot of uncertainty, I guess would be the word. And then my next point would be the COVID-19 guidelines I've seen at North. Despite the fact that last week there were 700 new COVID cases, 211 in a single day, students at North are paying less and less attention to the mask guidelines. Like, I've seen a lot of students just take mask breaks, and I know that the district is getting more and more heavy about no gaiter masks now. They have to be like the full face shields. But I think students are getting tired of the masks, and I think that it has to come with some sort of push from the student body, some sort of like, to get them I don't know how to get them excited about wearing masks again, some sort of way to be like, you're not doing this for you, you're doing this for other students. If you're not doing it, it's not only not cool for you, it's not cool for other students too. And security and staff are still adamant about enforcing the policy. I just feel like it's students that are taking a break, and it makes me uncomfortable, it makes other students uncomfortable, but overall I feel like it's becoming increasingly normal for students to just take a break in the classrooms, in the hall, at lunch. You take it off when you eat, you just walk around at lunch. And I know that after Friday, I feel like it was announced the new mask policy, where the no gaiters, and if you have a face shield, you have to have the new mask on. So I hope that that new mask policy can hopefully resolve some of this too. But those are just some general observations that I've observed. And that concludes my student report. Thank you.
I'll take over. Due to some health concerns, I'm going to be opting to keep my mask on if that's all right. So I've got a lot of the same things to say as Casey. Obviously, as we get further into the term, I have also noticed that students are getting a little bit more lax about the mask wearing guidelines. And I believe Casey mentioned having a push from the schools to really enforce that and make sure it's being followed. And I've noticed that a lot of the individual organizations at Central have been putting out mask campaigns of sorts. I know the Drama Club is working on a mask campaign, and a lot of individual organizations have been selling masks. And I do think that has been helping with the mask wearing push. So I don't know if that's something that can be integrated into other schools, but I've noticed that working really well at Central. So I figured I'd throw that out there as an option. I know everyone at Central was also pretty concerned and pretty confused about the extension of zero term. A lot of our teachers were aware of what was happening though, and they were able to give us pretty detailed explanations. So that kind of put a rest to the students' nerves a little bit, but I know a lot of students are concerned that they will be dabbling in busy work for the next week. And that's a concerning thing for students, is they want their time to be well used and well managed. And obviously we'll work through that. And then to end on a high note, we had 18 students accepted into the All-State Music Ensembles from Central. So I figured I'd end on a positive note, and that wraps up my report for the week.
So for West, referring to the term zero extension, I think there has also been like a bit of displacement in feelings when it comes to that. But a lot of teachers have combated that with making the assignments fun or relatable. For example, in my Spanish class, we're watching a movie it's based on a singer who's Spanish. So it's relating back to the curriculum, but not like adding extra workload for us. For other things like show choir, I know that they're starting up their classes for show choir soon, so that should be interesting. So a lot of people are looking forward to that. In terms of mass, I think for ours, for speaking from my perspective at least, it hasn't been as big of an issue from like what I'm hearing with the other class or with the other schools, but there has been a lot of leniency is what I would say. But I think a lot of students are still keeping up with that. They're still pushing the whole wearing masks because they have their own experiences with it too. But yeah, things have been interesting is what I would say. But not much has happened yet this week, in my opinion. It hasn't been too eventful, but it's also been a little insightful on how people are dealing with everything that's going on. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for those board reports. Board reports. Director Gosa, tell us about HOPE.
President Potts and I attended the Hope Time Capsule event with the city of Davenport, but I think the superintendent's going to report on that, so we can talk about that a little more. But our students did a phenomenal job, especially the Central student that sang the national anthem was like, wow. The drum line as well as the cheerleaders and the dance teams all did a great job. They even had the mayor dancing on stage, so I thought they did a pretty good job. And they weren't afraid to speak, and I think Jabari did a very well job putting that together. You look a lot smaller when you're sitting down there. When you're up on that stage, you're a big guy. And then Wednesday night, I attended the annual RSAI meeting, which started at 4:30 and went till 8 o'clock at night. Where we went over the 2021 priorities, which I had Mary send the meeting minutes out to everybody, so you guys would all have that. Otherwise, I think that's all I have.
Anyone else?
Bruce?
Director Postian.
On Tuesday, Karen and I attended the finance workshop, went over the authorized budget, line item budget. This was attended by staff and Gary Sinclair. Also, Karen and I met with Superintendent Snakeloth, Lisa Cruz, Patty Schroeder from the IASB, and Bill Decker, who's here this evening also from the AEA. And we are trying to work out a routine for the Finance Committee. And I think we're going to get more feedback, Superintendent Snakeloth, on that as time goes on. Karen, do you have anything to add?
Nope, that's good.
Director Hayes.
Just wanted to announce, a few people are aware of it, but there was huge controversy last year with the sale of the Lincoln Building. And I just want everyone to know publicly that right now they're in the process of doing trials with 10 students that are being tutored there by St. Ambrose students. Since a lot of them are having problems with their schoolwork, that they'll be over there from 10 to 2. Lunch will be provided for them, and just kind of assist these students. And it's not been determined as of yet if they will go a full year, a term, or what will happen, but in time it will increase. So just kind of FYI, the building is still used to assist in educating students.
Okay, there have been no requests for open forum, so we can move to the consent agenda. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Is there any discussion? Being no discussion, we'll move to the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Snyder,
I move that the board adopt the resolution that's recommended by the administration for the bills from the bill listing period of 10/8/20 through 10/21/20, whereas resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 10/8/20 through 10/21/20.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Any discussion? Director Gosa.
I just have a quick question. So we have a finance committee, so if there's like questions on the bills, do we direct that to the finance committee? If we get it like Friday and then they can get the answer for us? Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
But we did have that discussion at our meeting as far as Finance Committee reviewing all the bills.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yeah, if there was just, I don't have any, but I'm saying if there was a question, I know we have had in the past. Thank you.
No, you would direct that to Mary, who'd get you the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, because they don't have the access.
Well, I don't think, that wasn't the discussion last week, that the finance committee was going to take over that we would sit down and look at all the bills and that the questions would be directed to us. Now, that hasn't all been worked out yet, but eventually that is the plan.
But not immediately.
Right, we don't have the plan put together.
Further discussion? We'll move to the vote. Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome, Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. The Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of the contract for the IMEG engineering.
Mr. President,
Director Beck,
You skipped the superintendent's report.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have a mic before. Go ahead. You got
How about yours, Casey?
a report?
Yeah.
Give us a report.
All right. Okay. Well, in a time of constant change and uncertainty, October 17th, we had a moment of hope in the park where a large group of people, well, socially distanced, came together, and the symbol of planting a tree and talking about the direction that our community can head out of this was a wonderful event. And it was attended by many people from Davenport schools. I know Jake was there, Bill, several administrators, board president, vice president. I think there were some other board members there. But it was a wonderful event, a symbol of hope in this time. And I will tell you, Jabari, you did a wonderful job representing the district and showcasing exactly the mindset that we need to have in this time. So, Jabari, if you wouldn't mind just kind of recapping that event for some of our board members and community that were there.
Sure. Thank you, TJ. It was an incredible event. I think anytime you get adults together with children, it creates this atmosphere that anything's possible. And TJ tied it in well with Mr. Potts that hope is something you can't handcuff it, you can't put it away. When you look at children, they do give us hope. In a climate where we're dealing with, all these different things in the world, climate issues, race issues, systemic issues. When you come together, no matter what color you are, and you show the children that we can get over anything if we work together peacefully, it does create that hope. So I was honored to be a part of it, TJ, and the staff that were there. And I hope every student in Davenport School knows that these dreams aren't just for adults, they're really for you. You're truly our future. I want to give every student in Davenport, every kid in the Quad Cities an opportunity to submit those dreams, put them on your refrigerator, put them down, write them down, and believe that they're going to come true. And TJ, we're going to work this thing together. And as TJ leads us and our board, we're all going to learn together how to grow and hope in each other. Wonderful event.
Some of our other administrators that were there, actually, Jamie Weinsroll and her family were there, Aaron Vincent, Teresa Betchen, and Steve Muhlenhausen were in attendance there. They all had students that were there. And, if you want to see a symbol of hope, that kid that sung the national anthem, our drum line, our dance, that's wonderful. Listening to our student voice here, that's the world is in good hands, and it's never more apparent. And that's what gives me hope on a daily basis. So,
TJ, I want to also mention City of Davenport, all your officials, Mayor, City Administrator, Corey Spiegel, Mayor Matson, thank you so much. This is the beginning of a great relationship. And as we move forward with our efforts, just know the community is going to do the same thing. We got a lot of enthused parents and students going to keep this thing going.
Thank you very much, Murray.
Okay, now the chair will entertain a motion on the approval of the contract with IMEG. Director Beck.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the contract with IMEG Civil Engineering as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Any discussion? Director Snyder.
I just wanted to find out if this was on the construction plan. When I was on the board before, we had a 10-year plan, and I'm not sure if that's still in place, but was this planned for, basically?
I don't have the plan right in front of me right now, but I do not believe it was on the plan. It was looked at probably about a year ago as something to fix because of student safety and staff safety. There's a lot of holes around the building, concrete that's out of place, tripping hazards. People or children get their feet caught somewhere, can injure them.
All right, thank you.
Director Gosa.
The only question I had, the plans that get drawn up for this stuff, they're ours. We own them, right? Because before we didn't, and then we would always have to have them pay to do new plans. Because I think this includes some playground equipment too.
Yeah, we should get the plans. We should get a hard copy of them.
Okay.
I think it says there, and we get an electronic copy and a hard copy.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to check on that because that hasn't been our process. But if we're paying this kind of money, we should own that stuff.
I understand. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Hayes.
Just for clarity, it says that the preliminary budget for the project was $880,000. Am I clear in understanding that we're gonna just pay the lump sum of the 67.5 and done?
Yeah, that would be for the contracted services for IMEG. And then there's an additional $800,000 for the contract of the work. Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Director Beck.
This question is maybe slightly an aside. I noticed, so you said there is going to be a play area replacement. I noticed that the play structure at my son's school is starting to have some spots that aren't as safe. Do we go through every year and repair and replace those, or are those play structures that have been built with PTA funds, or are we responsible for those? I guess is my basic question.
There's a plan. I believe there's a kind of a long-term plan they've looked at over the years and kind of systematically gone through buildings one at a time.
Okay.
When looking at this building, when I looked at the fact that we were fixing it because of safety, it looked like some of the playground equipment was having some issues as well. And I thought if we fixed the inside of the building not very long ago, we should just fix the outside of the building at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Move to the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of policies.
Mr. President,
Director Beck,
I move that the board approve the policies as recommended by the policy committee.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Discussion?
Wait, do I have to list the numbers of the policies? Okay. So I'm going to just list the numbers so that they're in the record. Okay. Policy number, they're still Davenport numbers, 602.3, policy 401.45, 408.1, a new policy 106.01, and 103.02, along with supporting documentation. And I believe that is, oh, no, policy 401.01, policy 401.42, and supporting documentation. And those are the policies that I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
Is there any discussion? Being no, Director Gosa.
So Bruce, Allison, and I are all on the policy committee. That's why we never discuss any of this, because we have a long, in-depth discussion, but I don't want it to feel like no one ever discusses anything. But that's why the three of us don't, because we're usually in that meeting for a couple hours going over all this stuff with whichever department head is responsible for that area or whatever. So that's why I don't ask questions on policies.
We'll move to the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. We'll now move to discussion items. I'm going to have a report on third grade reading data. Corey, there you are.
I'd like to, before Corey gets started, I'd like to kind of do some front loading. When this data was originally being presented, Shane Williams, Corey, and our team decided that it would probably be best if we started putting into the continuous improvement process inside of here. So they've done a wonderful job integrating in the continuous improvement process. And so that also stands for the database decision making, which is one of our citations that we're going to talk about a little bit later today. But this way you can start rooting yourself into exactly how should we be evaluating all things. And so this is kind of a preview for your own mindset, how we plan to establish routines inside of our district for reviewing programs and determining their effectiveness. So thank you, Corey.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share our kindergarten through third grade literacy data with you. I know you've requested that, and I'm glad that I'm able to do that. I also have Bonnie Acey here with me, who is the program director for elementary curriculum instruction, and so she'll be helping with this board report. So TJ did a great job of, oh goodness. Mary, I scrolled down. There we go. Okay, TJ did a great job of giving the overview of the continuous improvement process. And so the Department of Education adopted the continuous improvement process to be utilized with every school improvement thing that we do, right? In our schools, all the way from the state legislation when they put in certain programs for best practices, as well as what we're doing at the local level. And so the outcome of that is to improve student outcomes for everyone. So it doesn't matter if we're looking at finances, we're looking at math data or reading data, we need to do it with this idea of continuous improvement. And it is a database decision method that starts with determining what your current status is. So there's 5 steps in the process. As we look at data, we utilize analyzing and reporting our data process with our principals, with our teachers, and we really do a good job of doing many pieces of this process. So as I'm sharing this with you, we're going to highlight this process, and we're going to talk about areas that we do a great job in and areas that we do need to improve in. So determining your current state, there's questions that we need to ask ourselves as we're thinking about any pieces of data that we're looking at. What is our desired state, and what is our current state? Where do we want to be, and where are we currently, and where's that gap between our current state and our desired state? And so in Iowa, we have Iowa Early Literacy Healthy Indicators. And when we look at universal screening data, which is what you have, we're going to be looking at today, we need to see how healthy is our core instruction, that universal instruction level. So indicator goal 1 and 3 are what we look at when we give our benchmark assessments. We want to ensure an indicator, our healthy indicator 3, that 80% of our students screened are at or above benchmark. So they're proficient readers. We also, in indicator 1, need to first ensure that have we screened 95% of all of our students. And we in Davenport do a great job of meeting that benchmark every year. And this year, with all of its extreme circumstances, from online students to hybrid, we were able to meet that healthy indicator 1. We were able to screen 95% of all students kindergarten through 3rd grade. When you're looking at healthy indicator 2, it's progress monitoring of students who are below benchmark. Healthy indicator 4 is ensuring that if students are at benchmark, that they stay at benchmark at proficiency in the fall, winter, and also the spring. And healthy indicator 5 and 6 are looking at interventions, ensuring that we're able to, students who are below benchmark, that we're giving them the right interventions in place. So this aligns in our desired state to our teaching and learning plan goals. Healthy indicator 3 is that goal that you also see in our teaching and learning plan, our continuous, which is 80% of our students who are screened will be at benchmark. We add on there that we also want to see a 10% increase from the previous year. As we look at this data, you're going to see we're not at 80%. So that 10% increase is a lofty goal to get us to what we want our desired state to be. Those two goals are talking about fast literacy screeners. One is talking about early literacy and CBM, and the other one is using a universal screener called A-reading. Those healthy indicators 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 that we talked about previously are really the things that ensure that we can get to that bar of 80% of our students are at benchmark. So what is our current state? So then the 2018-2019, you can see the data in front of you. This the screener is given 3 times a year. So in the fall, you see that in blue. We give it in the fall, the winter, and then also the spring. Kindergarten and first grade data is based on the FAST early reading screener, and that is there's 4 subtests within that screener. And so those 4 subtests are concept of print, sounds, letter names, and letter sounds. And how students do on that, there's a benchmark for that in the fall. The data you see there says that 48.1% in the fall of 2018-19 were proficient. So in kindergarten, you can see, our students increase in the 2018-2019 at each benchmark. In second and third grade, the data we're looking at is based on, for 2018-19, is based on the FAST CBM screener. So that is a reading fluency screener that is a predictor of reading comprehension. So for 2018 and 19, this was our Davenport default screener that was reported to the state. So you can see with this data that we did not meet what that desired state is of 80%, but we showed a lot of progress in kindergarten. So that takes us to 2019, last year, 2019, 2020. You can see in this year that we did not have spring data due to school closure. So we only have our fall data and our winter data to look at from last year. But you can see that we showed, again, that increase in kindergarten, a slight increase in third grade and in second grade, and it was a little stagnant in first grade. So that takes us to the 2020-2021 school year, this school year. And like I said before, we were able to get 95% of all Davenport students assessed in the fall. And we did change our assessment for this year in second and third grade. So kindergarten and first grade, whether they were online or hybrid, we gave the early literacy assessment, the early reading assessment. But in second and third grade, we switched to the A reading screener. That is an adaptive assessment, so it's a computer-based assessment, but it's also a strong predictor of reading comprehension and how well students are reading. It was easier to administer that assessment, and many districts across the state went to the A reading screener because CBM is a one-on-one assessment. So this year, to get to that 95% of all students screened, we had our literacy coaches calling families, working with them. We had many students. If you were here about three weeks ago, you would see families coming to the administration center, setting up appointments so we could get all of our students screened in K1. Okay. So here is our 3-year fall data percent proficient. So I showed you the last 3 years. You know that this year we changed to A reading, but we really only have 3 years of the same screening window to really do a comparison on. So as we look at our fall data, there's a lot of things in our current state. We know that where we need to be. We know what it is. But we did an analysis and noted that there's a lack of explicit foundational skill instruction in spring of 2020. We know that due to school closure. I know that Dr. Beck sat on one of our Return to Learn subgroups, and we talked a lot about what can we do to ensure that we help our students with those foundational skills. So when you look at this data, something should really pop out to you, right? And that would be the first grade scores. you can note that drastic difference, right, with first grade fall scores compared to when they were in kindergarten, right, or any of the other years. So our focus this year was really on ensuring that we were doing good pre-assessments at the beginning of the year, ensuring that we're giving that explicit, direct instruction to our first grade students. As you look at second and third grade, you can see that the foundational skills are more securely in place for those students, and they're better able to maintain that reading proficiency. This is similar to data that we're seeing across the state. I have this just as a slight comparison with our Mississippi Bend AEA region. You can see that in K6, when you combine all the proficiencies for Mississippi Bend, it was 70% in the fall of 19. That dropped to 63%. Across Iowa, it went to 61%. So we're very close with that, similar kind of drop in nature. And then in first grade, that was the most extreme drop with the Mississippi Bend AEA. And of course, we are part of the Mississippi Bend AEA, but even across the state, percent proficient for first graders was at 47% in the fall. So there's definitely a gap between what we want our current state to be and our desired state. You should have in your board packet a set of data. Do you have a data table that you can pull up? I can pull it up for you here. So another thing that we look at when we're looking at our data is looking at subgroup information. And so here you're going to see an analysis of all of the different subgroups, or I'm sorry, the data set of all the different subgroups that we look at. We look at this data by cohort, and also by trend data. So as you're looking here, the trend data is we're gonna look at kindergarten across time. That's gonna talk about how our trends are doing. So if you look at kindergarten and first grade, you're gonna note that all subgroups started the year at a higher proficiency in the fall, again, this is fall 2019-2020, than fall of 2018. All subgroups except kindergarten and 2 or more races started the year at a lower proficiency than kindergartners did fall of 2019. When you're at second grade, the trend data is a bit inconsistent across subgroups. So you can notice that 2018-19, some increased to 2019-2020, and some decreased. There were some inconsistencies there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you said this is percentage of students who are proficient or percent proficiency for the students?
That is the percent proficient in second grade on the fall screening assessment.
So
percent of all students proficient in the fall.
Okay.
So if I look at that in second grade, I can say that in 2018-2019, 51.4% of all of our students were proficient.
Thank you.
In third grade, if you look at third grade, all subgroups except EL started the year at a higher proficiency again in 2019 than the fall of 2018. And then in the fall of 2020, all subgroups except Hispanic, Latino, and 2 or more races started the year at a lower proficiency than the third graders did in fall of 2019. So you can see that drop in most cases from 2021 to you can see the drop from 2020 to 21 to the previous year. Then the next way that we look at data is cohort data. So I know that question came up in the last board report when we were talking about assessments. We also look at that. So that's looking at kindergartens last year compared to first graders this year and seeing how they are doing. So when we look at our cohort data in kindergarten students in fall of 2018 showed an increase in percent proficient as first graders in fall of 2019 across all subgroups. During the fall of 2020, if we're looking at the 18-19, the EL cohort group continued. They were the only group that really continued to increase from their kindergarten year from first and then to second grade. Our first grade students in fall of 2018 did show a decrease in percent proficient as second graders in fall of 2019 across all the subgroups except Black or African American students. And then during the fall of 2020, all subgroups continued to increase percent proficient from second to third. So I know this is a lot of data. I know we're talking about lots of different changes between trend, looking at it at one grade level across 3 years, looking at cohort data, looking from kindergarten to first grade to second grade. But these are the type of questions that we need to engage in to ensure that are we making the right moves in the right direction. And it's a part of that continuous improvement process, which the first step is, what is our current state? And then what's our desired state? And is there a gap between those? Mary, if I go back, am I going to get there? Ooh, I did. Okay. Just 1 second. All right. So that gives you an overview of our current state, and I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie. We're going to go to the second step of identifying strengths and barriers.
Okay, so step number 2 looks at identifying strengths and barriers. With this step of the continuous improvement process, we want to ask, what are learner strengths and barriers at the universal, at that core level of instruction, and what are the needs that must be addressed? And so when we first ask what are learner strengths and barriers at that universal core level, we have a lot of strengths that we want to celebrate. First, once those foundational skills are consistently taught at the early grades with fidelity, what we're noticing is that those students in the later elementary grades are able to maintain that proficiency. We saw that in our data that Corey just presented. We know that we have a research-based 95% curriculum that provides that explicit instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics. And we have ongoing professional development in those key early literacy areas of 95% instruction, Lexia, EAK, which is enhancing alphabet knowledge. We sometimes call that letter a day, as well as those class-wide interventions. In addition, we have ongoing building visits that help us monitor those key pieces of early literacy for fidelity of implementation, which then help us to determine what are our next steps for professional development in the areas of foundational skills. Some barriers that really come into play here are understanding that missing that explicit foundational skill instruction with that 95% did show in the spring of 2020 that caused our students to decrease that proficiency in the fall. And that was not consistent with the trend data that we have seen in previous years. We also know a barrier is that our Wonders core reading program, what we use, really does have it's weak in its explicit instruction with phonics and phonemic awareness, which is why we have had to supplement the core. We know that that is an area that we're going to have to look at moving forward with any curriculum adoptions, because we have had to supplement Wonders with that 95% Lexia and letter a day to help fill in those holes. So just noticing those strengths and barriers helps us to develop our plan. And so you'll see that step 3 of the SIP is to create a plan. And so when we're creating a plan, we want to make sure that we're asking those important questions of how will universal tier needs be addressed and what are those priorities. It's important to note here that we're not creating a new plan. Please know that we are consistently refining and revising this plan. We've been doing this for over 3 years with this data. So when we're looking specifically at how are we going to address the universal tier needs, this is in regards to those early literacy key areas of 95%, class-wide intervention, Lexia, and that EAK. And so with those, we want to make sure that we are creating a plan of implementation with fidelity, and that's just to ensure that we are providing professional development, aligning our resources, and monitoring those pieces with fidelity. So to do that, we wanted to kind of put in a format for you that shows we're going to continue to do these pieces, focus on these areas, and take away something off their plates, not focusing on this. So when we're looking at 95% group, that is our core instruction. We will not be using the wonders piece of phonics within that program. With implementing class-wide interventions, we'll be focusing on that protocol from PRESS and VPR versus just those isolated strategies that a teacher may use in intervention. We'll focus on Lexia Core 5, that personalized learning in the 6 areas of reading, versus maybe another selected online program that a teacher may choose. With the EAK, that letter a day, that's going to be our focus of instruction versus Wonders that has a letter a week that they focus on. So then we are ready. We have our plan in place, and we'll continue to implement these actions by asking ourselves these questions. So we're at step 4, implementation of the actions, and we want to look at how are we doing? Are we doing what we said we would do with fidelity? How will the implementation of the universal tier be monitored over time? This is definitely a celebration for us, and I think it's really important to look at, again, those key areas that I talked about with EAK, Lexia, 95% class-wide interventions, and then that really key piece of fidelity through the site visits. You can see that these actions in the table are laid out over time to show you the progression that we have done to make sure that these are embedded in our everyday universal core instruction. So for example, with 95%, in the 18-19 year, we started with training that began at that core level of implementation. The following year in 19-20, we continued with that implementation and training in 95% as our explicit core curriculum. And then this year, just knowing the impacts of COVID, knowing the need for accelerated learning, we adjusted the pacing to ensure that all foundational skills were explicitly taught to ensure that our students would have that essential learning. We also have 6 training and coaching days provided by 95% consultants to use this year as well.
Okay, so the last piece in the continuous improvement process, and again, this isn't something that's just done one step at a time. It's continuous, and meaning that you're doing 5 as you're creating your plan, as you're ensuring that you're implementing those actions. But we need to know, are those actions working? And as there are pieces, and this is of K-3 literacy data that we have done really, really well. We have really isolated that we know we have some weak phonics and phonemic awareness, and you saw the changes from 2018 to 2019, 2020. We have some extenuating circumstances with this new year, but we need to continue. This is an area, a citation for Davenport. It's an area that we need to give close attention to and continue our improvement efforts. So in implementing and seeing if those actions are implemented or we're assessing it, we can say, yes, we're doing okay. We're ensuring that professional development was targeted specifically to 95% group and intervention protocol. We can also say that, yes, we provided coaching in Lexia Core 5, and we put our resources and our time and efforts into those things, and we know that our teachers are getting the professional learning that they need. We're not there yet with our K-3 literacy data. We know what our current desired state is. It's 80%. We need to continue to use the continuous improvement process to assess the impact of our actions, to know which ones have the most leverage and what are the other things that do not. So we're definitely continuing to use this process to get better. So with that, I'm going to close this board report and open it up for questions.
Director Kosa.
First, I want to thank you. This is the stuff I've been asking for over a year. You did a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness of target. Okay, you did a strategic plan. You always roll through the strategic plan. Had we done this stuff well over a year ago, we would probably be in a lot better spot. But I can talk all day about that, but I'm not going to. My question is, you've done the strength and weaknesses of the district. Have you broken it down by building? Because obviously some buildings are going to have strengths where other buildings might have more weaknesses, right? Is that something we're going to get to at some point? Because obviously you can tell by the numbers you're getting if it's a certain area that needs work. And then I would assume that fall numbers are going to be lower, winter numbers should be higher, and spring numbers should be the best because those were our benchmarks to get supports in. Do we have adequate enough supports to do the things we need to do? And then is there a way that you can make sure the supports are working and they're being utilized correctly, I guess? If you want to start answering some of
Okay.
those, 'cause I have a whole ton, but I'll probably let some other people go too.
So you had two questions that I heard. So tell me if I hit the mark. First was, do we analyze the data at the building level? And the answer is yes. This data report could be 2 hours in length, right? We could go into all of the different pieces, but we do. We look at it at the district level, and the same continuous improvement process is done looking at it by, we did subgroups, but also at the attendance center, the building level, and then buildings also do that for the students that are just in their building. So it is looked at like that, and you can have that data if that's what you desire. Then the second question you asked is if we are able to put the right, are we able to ensure that the right supports are going to the right students? So that's part of that, one of the healthy indicators, right? It's looking at students who are below benchmark. Are we progress monitoring those students? And are we giving them an intervention? And we are monitoring that. That's monitored not just through site visits, but also in the way that they report their data. So we know if students are being progress monitored, and they have to track the interventions that they're giving to those students.
Okay. And then you said you do building visits for implementation. How often are those done? And then if you do find coaching opportunities, how soon do you revisit that? Like, so me and my job, I cover 13 locals. I check on each one every month. One, I might need more support, so then I hit them twice a month. Does that make sense?
It does. So this is a unique year, right, for site visits due to COVID. But in the past, we would go out at each benchmark, try to, at least twice a year. And it sometimes, if it's not, it might need another visit just to say, you know what, we gave you some ideas, some supports, and it's about support. Just the state has the same model of differentiated accountability. Everybody needs something different, just like students do in the classroom. So those supports are given to buildings with what they need. During this time, we do a lot with video conferencing with our teacher teams, with our our CTTs, to ensure that they're getting what they need to.
Okay. I'll ask one last question. I'll let the other board members go, and then I'll probably have some more. With the data, I am certain you're able to target a certain building that might need more supports than others. That might need more, obviously, right? Because you're keeping track of the scores, and those might change a little bit if the student goes to a different school or you have a teacher goes to a different building. Or I understand there's a lot of factors in that, but the way you're going to collect the data, I imagine you'll be able to target the specific. I mean, almost probably right down to the teacher and student. That, I mean, I would assume, is that kind of how this is going to be set up to do?
I'd take a crack at that one. So the state system is actually set up that way for buildings to be named comprehensive, and in that goes a deeper dive. They're also allocated more resources towards that building. They're formerly known as Senate Dollar School in Need of Assistance. Now they call them $103. And with that comes more frequent visits. With that becomes more oversight. And so that this process is really ingrained in getting just at exactly what you're talking about. We have buildings inside of our own district that do layer on more supports, and those supports typically come from the AEA to coach through that continuous improvement process. And so an example of that would be a couple of our buildings, AEA would more frequently go to those buildings, and plus Bonnie and Corey's teams would go and frequently check to see for progress and understanding, but it's really more about a system to being put in. So I would say that that's really our state system that's really addressing that. Individual teachers' performance is typically done at an evaluative level by the administrator.
Thank you. I'll let some other people go now for a little bit.
Director Beck, and then Director Klein-Jerome.
Thank you, guys. I asked for third grade reading data lots of times and I got it. Yay. And in case people out there aren't aware, the reason we look at third grade reading data is because research shows that students are less likely to have some of the discipline problems, drop out of high school, things like that later on if they're reading at third grade level at the end of third grade. And that's kind of nationally. Anyway, so I have several questions, but I've distilled it down to 3. Number 1, the English language learners jumped a lot in terms of, what was it? The second grade English language learners went from 14.3% proficient to, and the year before was 17.6 to 38.9% in the fall of 2020. And that is fantastic. So my question is, what were the ELL teachers doing that allowed for that incredible improvement? And if we see something like that and we can identify what they're doing, how are we able to roll that out to other schools and other places?
So that's looking at the trend data.
Yeah, it's in the
at different group of students for 3 years, which is important to look at. It is an anomaly, I would say, in the data, but we do need to investigate it because it could be a strength, right? And that's that's the second step is what is a strength? So that could be something that is a strength. If you look at the cohort data from 1920 and then to 2021, it did also increase. So there's another strength to look at. And so that's a model of the process that we do when we look at the data. I don't have the answer about what exactly they are doing, but we do need to investigate that.
Okay, thank you. So number 2, I remember when, I think the Wonders curriculum has only been around for just a few years, right?
7 years.
What am I thinking of? Maybe I'm thinking of Treasures. Was that?
It was before Wonders.
That was before Wonders. Okay. Has it really been 7 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is 7 years.
Okay. Anyway, so I guess I know no curriculum is perfect, but how do we end up choosing a curriculum that has something that seems to be kind of a glaring weakness? And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just curious as to how that might happen. And I know nothing is perfect. I mean, I choose textbooks and they're great for everything except for that, right? So unless you make your own. So how does that work?
So yes, Wonders was adopted 7 years ago. It is a strategy-based basal reader. What we really need is a standards-based reading program. So that, and at the early years, what are those standards? It's phonics and phonemic awareness, and Wonders is a package, right? And it's aligned through strategies. It doesn't work it works for probably a lot of readers. It doesn't work for all readers. And so we've had to, over this process, analyze the fact that, you know what, in our early readers that are starting out, they need a strong phonics and phonemic awareness, which is what got us into creating the plan to enhance Wonders with that direct instruction in phonics and phonemic awareness. It's definitely not perfect because it's taking away a piece, right, of a curriculum and putting this into it, but it needed to be done. And so your question was, how did it happen? It's an adoption process that is heavily relied on teacher recommendations. And Wonders is a very similar to Treasures that was had in the past. I can only speculate that might be why it was chosen.
Okay. I guess like I said, nothing's perfect. So, and sometimes these things you don't figure out until you implement them and you say, oh, wait, this is not delivering this. And someday I'm assuming we'll investigate when we need to change curriculum again. But I hope we stay with Wonders for a little bit longer so we can kind of see the data moving, we're not comparing apples to oranges. My last question is, what efforts are we doing to build inclusivity into this? So for example, in the Wonders curriculum, how many of the images and the stories are people of color? How many of the test questions are about people who are not white Iowans? What are we doing to make this a welcoming curriculum? Because I know kids are going to read when they see people that look like themselves. So can you speak to that a little bit? And that gets at our disproportionality.
So when we adopt curriculum, we look at it with a rubric. I believe it's called EQUIP, but I can get back. Do you want to fact check me on that? Because I'm not too sure if that's the right acronym. But part of that is looking at multiculturalism. So, and then it's a rubric that you're going through. You're looking at pieces of the curriculum to see if it has those elements in place. When we did the adoption, the teachers did go through that rubric. So there are areas of growth that we can do within other areas of our curriculum for sure to ensure that balance. And we've changed some of that at the 4th and 5th grade level to ensure that not only are students seeing images of children that look like them, but they're reading stories by authors, right, that look like them, and they're seeing images of from other backgrounds than predominantly, white America.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I did just want to say I appreciate the action plan where you're saying we will not continue additional teacher-selected programs. I mean, not that people don't pick good stuff, but it's very hard when everybody's doing their own thing to kind of, I appreciate you guys saying, no, this is what we're going with, and listening to that feedback and changing it only if it's necessary. So thank you.
Before I go to Karen, I just want to get an opportunity for clarification. You used four terms so far in your presentation, and I just wondered if it would be helpful if we had a definition of those terms: phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, and fluency.
Okay. So, and now Bonnie is going to tell me if I'm giving you the right definitions. Just put me on the spot. So phonemic awareness, I'm going to start with that. Phonemic awareness is students understanding the sounds, right, that make up the words. Phonics is the pronunciation of those sounds, putting those sounds together and blending them. So that would be your phonemic awareness, and your phonics, and comprehension is understanding what you're reading. Fluency is the rate at which you read orally. Fluency has a great predictor, right? If you're able to fluently read, you typically are reserving enough of your capacity to be able to understand what you're reading. So that is why we use that typically as a progress monitoring, because it also is looking at the phonics piece of it. If you can put the words together, you're fluently reading them, you can understand what you're reading. Does that help?
Yeah, phonemic awareness, that's what we used to tell kids, sound it out.
Did I do okay? Perfect. Okay.
Sound it out.
Yes.
And I would disagree about the fluency, but that was from my own personal experience with it, because I don't think you have to read so fast that you don't always get the comprehension. I think comprehension is more important, but that was my experience as I was teaching. It is disappointing to hear that we've adopted and put so much money into a curriculum that is lacking a whole lot of stuff. So that being said, I appreciate the fact that you realize some of these things aren't working and you're willing to dump it. That has not always been the practice in the district. So if it's not working, we just kept doing it and adding more and more and more. So it's nice to hear some things are being dumped that shouldn't be used. I know we have a lot of people, reading coaches, TLC people, who work with teachers but do not work with students. This seems, when I saw the first grade scores, and I understand why, you know, they missed a whole lot of school, it was alarming to see the numbers. Is it time we take those TLC people, reading coaches, and say, okay, you're going to work with this little group of first graders and give them a whole lot of one-on-one or two-to-one? Like, this is critical. And I would rather see them working with kids than working with the teachers at this point, just to get those scores up, get their reading down, give them that foundation that they've missed. And if they're only going to school 2 or 3 days a week, I don't know that we can rely on a computer to be able to fill in what they missed. But you've got the people there, if you're willing to redirect them and say, here, you're going to work with this little group of little people, and we got to get this under control.
So you're modeling part of the continuous improvement process, right? That's part of identifying potential barrier, right? And are we, when we look at that, are we creating a plan where we're putting our allocations and our financial resources to ensure that we're getting the intended outcome? So I hear you.
Other questions? Director Poston.
Well, just follow up what Karen was just talking about. When we've only got the students in class half the time, how effective is this going to be in getting these scores up and increasing our percentages? In my own mind, that's going to be tough until we get these kids into the classroom 100% of the time.
Yep, that is a concern that, I mean, we share, I think we all share, right? Is how is the impact? That's a concern that we share, I think we all share, right? It's about how is COVID addressing learning loss, and how can we negate that? What are the things what kind of, supports are we putting in place? And so our efforts are focused on the student when they're in front of us, and ensuring that we're giving them the best direction when they're, even when they're at home.
And then one other question, under create a plan, you talk about we will not continue an isolated strategy utilized as class-wide intervention. Would you explain that a little further?
So implementing class-wide intervention is something that when you look at your data and your students are below 60%. So in a class of 30 kids, right? 60% of those students are below benchmark. And you're not just giving each individual kid a little something. You need to do something for the whole class, because we all need it. They all need it. It's good for everybody right now. And so in the past, teachers would use a lot of best practices to do something like that. Readers theater, some great things. They're not bad things. It's not saying that you can't do them, but it's ensuring that a evidence-based class-wide intervention that we've trained on, we put a lot of finances in getting that intervention to be trained, and the materials is utilized. So it's saying that that is the thing that we're going to ensure we're using. It's like what do you call it? Like the vitamin for the core, right? You're giving that vitamin, everybody's taking it, it's the same thing. So it's just more of a systemic way of doing it, ensuring that we're using press, right? Instead of some of those just, I really like this thing and it works for me, I'm going to use it.
Director Glossa.
I think I only have one this time. My question is, how far along are you with your plan on implementing this and making sure this is done so that when we get the spring numbers from this year, we're up to 80%?
So it's a continuous plan, right? So it's something that we're doing It's how far along? I gotta remember. Your questions trick me. You need to say your question again.
So you're putting together a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the numbers right now. The fall, it's 59.6%, or whichever chart I'm looking at right now, which that's well below 80. So where are you at with the plan that you're putting together to address these to get these scores up? Like, are you in the beginning stages, putting sticky notes on the wall, trying to figure out what we need to do? Where are you further along than that we know what resources we need and we're going to start filtering them out?
No, we're further along than that. We're implementing the plan, but we have to see with the hybrid schedule, what are the additional supports that certain schools, certain classrooms need. So I wouldn't say that we're just creating the plan and we haven't done anything. The first step is ensuring that 95% of our students are screened. We have that data now. Now we know the students that we need to ensure are being progress monitored. If our teachers need more support with that, that's where we're focused on, right? And then those class-wide interventions. So we just got our data back 2 weeks ago, and now we're implementing those actions, providing support as we see how our students are doing when they're progress monitoring. So we're along the way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We'll now move on to a overview or a brief discussion or a presentation on a citation update.
So just to piggyback off of everything you saw, man, oh, there we go.
Amy doesn't want you to say.
So one of the key things that are coming up down the road is the K-3 literacy in our district in terms of citation. So we know that that's something that we're going to continue to work on and receive direct feedback from the state and the AEA. So, but that's our current status, our current reality, and how we are moving forward with the issue of early literacy. Which there's some wonderful things going on in our early literacy in terms of closing some of the gaps that we have. I wanted to give specific updates in 3 areas. The first one would be in crisis response, violence prevention. Jake Klipsch and Corey Guy are working very closely with Shane Williams on the what of CRVPT and also a timeline. But here's the 3 key areas I want you to know. Recently, the teams have been reestablished in this area. So there's a district team that has district level leaders on it. And that team solely works on the implementation of the team and developing the professional development and timelines that occur. There's also a principal team that looks into what does this look like as it rolls out into our buildings and to our students. And then there's a community team. The community team, I would say, is probably the one that has been meeting the most frequently, and the other 2 are going to be reinvented or regrouped in the next couple of months. The community team recently just met, and it was a wonderful meeting. We're seeking feedback and input from our community stakeholders on how to best move forward. A schedule for the rolling out of the crisis response violence prevention in our buildings and in our district is being developed right now. It's probably in the final stages of vetting, which has the plan beginning tomorrow from. So the plan has this being rolled out to our buildings in the middle of November. And from there, getting out to our students and families. Those are our 3 main points from the crisis response violence prevention. I think it's very important, the number 2, very important to notice that we're beginning to start to input the continuous improvement process in everything that we're doing. And so the idea of this is how we look at data, this is how we look at finances, this is how we look at anything, this is how we look at our long-range facility plan, here's how we begin to operate in our questions, and it is continuous. That work is being led by Shane Williams and Tara Parrish inside of our district, and right now they're beginning to wrap a process around what does it look like in every single one of our citations, and what does that look like from the school board all the way through our system. So when we are looking at finances, when we are looking at student data, this is how we look at those items. And the third piece is a financial update. I was very proud that our board members came. We had originally scheduled for them to be there in the morning, and they wanted to stick around all day. So I tip my hat to you for that and really appreciate it. It was very beneficial for you to be there, experience that work with us, and you really jumped in and really did that. And I'm excited about the direction that we're heading. The entire cabinet last Tuesday met, and we had some training from Gary Sinclair. Because as you know, you just heard two wonderful educators stand up here and talk. But when we got into education, we wanted to work with phonics and phonemic awareness and things of that nature. But it's also very important for cabinet members to know and understand our budgets. And so Gary led us through a wonderful finance workshop. And then from there, Ken had already given the report about our newly formed finance committee and how that's going to work. Kent, I think you said something that hit the nail on the head. We are going to be establishing routines that allow our school board members to get the information, to ask questions. When we are presenting the bills and different items, you guys will have a knowledge and an understanding to begin to answer those questions. As we broke for the day, our administrative teams went and worked on line item budgets. And I want you to think about a line item budget as everything in our district in a line item. And so from that day forward, we've been really digging into what are our building budgets, what are our administrators, pairs, what are those things costing us? And then that way we're going to be able to make much better decisions moving forward. So right now, the finalizing of that line item budget to know the exact current reality that we have is being worked on. So as we're talking today, we're not quite sure exactly how we're going to end the school year in terms of our budget, but we've got it pretty close. So we're looking to present some information and data to you at the next board meeting. That concludes my report on our citations and updates. And I'd entertain any questions right now.
You mentioned the crisis response and violence prevention. We have a team basically of like district admin, principals, and community. Do we have student voices in any of those groups?
Yes, it is in the plan to incorporate student voices into that group, yes.
Okay.
They're actually going to be an absolutely critical part. They know when violent events are going to happen. They do not want, maybe Meredith, how about we let you speak for yourself?
So I think that's a fantastic idea. I know Central, and I think one of the other schools in the district have already implemented the MVP program, the Mentors in Violence Prevention program. And I know I was one of the founding members of that, and that it's not necessarily something you do with prior knowledge of an event, but it's more of a preventative measure. And so a group of students goes around to the freshman classrooms, and we sort of brief them, and we say, this is what you should do if this situation should arise. This is what you should do if this situation should arise. And we take those preventative steps. And I think that student voices would definitely be useful on that kind of board, because we do have the insider experience.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Director Gosa.
I guess if no one else is going to ask questions, so we get dinged on. How are we looking for the citations? I mean, is it really good progress? Is it kind of stagnant? Are we, is everybody on board with doing this, that we need to get this done? Is there any pushback, anything like that?
So I will tell you that, and Bill Decker is going to come up here in a second, but I will tell you, there has been incredible progress made towards launching the movement for our citations. To give you an example, I know Shane and Corey and Jake have been working tirelessly at this crisis response violence prevention plan so it can be rolled out. The work that's been done so far has been outstanding. Has it rolled out yet? No, but there's a plan to roll it out. That's the progress that we need to continue to show. Another example is that our HR department and our finance departments are analyzing our entire system at how we report things and changing it and tweaking it and putting in routines that will allow us to have a better dashboard sitting at this table. Those things are happening at a very rapid pace. So those are two examples. The progress that we are making needs to absolutely continue, and it cannot slow down. But I believe the progress that we're doing and the direction that we're heading is going to be is heading in the right direction. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. How soon will we be rolling some of this stuff out to where we're like addressing it, boom, right now? I mean, I understand you got to work on it, you got to have a plan to roll out and stuff like that, but how soon can we see some of this stuff come in?
Excellent question. And the timeline was almost finalized, but the first training is happening in the middle of November. So we're a couple of weeks away from bringing all the leaders in to do the initial training. And when we train our leaders and our building leadership teams, that's what starts the rolling out process. And so that process is actually going to start in the middle of November with hopefully, I think the actual plan that we saw today had an end date of December 18th, not an end date, but that's one of the benchmarks that we're having. So basically the middle of December, we will have a good chunk of the very initial crisis response violence prevention training implemented. So very soon.
Thank you.
One of the other citations that we're going to talk about here in a second is our board training, which is another thing that we've made great progress on. I know that you two have been working very close with that. I didn't mean to, while I was saying that, I think Allison raised her hand. So before we get into that, I guess we'd.
Oh shoot, where was I going? So we're talking about this crisis response and violence prevention, and we know that right now we have, less than half of our students in the buildings at any one time, right? So statistically speaking, we're going to see fewer incidents just because. What are we building into this? To make sure that the trainings that we do this year are still implemented with fidelity next year when we have hopefully all of our students back in their buildings, and B, to actually address some of the trauma and issues that students are dealing with now, being at home, not in the situations that they were normally in. It's affected different people. Parents have lost jobs, whatever. Are we building in some of that extra trauma-informed response to knowing that what might be coming down the pipe in the future?
Yes, we are. Those things are being built into here. An example of that would be we're working very closely with our agencies, one of them in particular, Family Resources, to provide this care after an event. And so that's just one example of how we plan to address that during an incident. If that answers your question.
Sort of. I guess I'm thinking, everyone's been affected by COVID, and even students who maybe wouldn't have been the students who got involved in a violent incident before COVID might be now because they've had all these other stresses placed on them. Have we built in, that kind of thing to make sure that we're not just planning for preventing the violence we saw last year, we're planning for preventing the violence we may see in the future?
I think what you're asking are what are we doing for the everyday social emotional behavior health of our students, and that's I would say that's completely different than what we do during a crisis violent event. I think that would be a great discussion item to to put on a future board meeting. How are we addressing those in our meetings? I think that would be great to discuss.
So the fact that we're sort of in a long drawn out crisis would be more of a basic social, emotional, behavioral health rather than this type of thing here. Okay. And then my other question, I don't think I heard you answer. What are we doing to make sure that the training that people are doing now is still implemented with fidelity next year, or theoretically when all of our students are back in the building? Are we going to do a refresher? Do we have onboarding? All that.
So in the improvement process, that is actually baked into the cake of the plan that they have. So when we come to a spot where we can share that plan, because it's not quite complete, you will be able to see exactly how that's going to be evaluated and maintained. To give you an example, I think this one is pretty relevant to the situation. A violent event might not happen in kindergarten or first grade, but neither would a tornado, hopefully. But I will tell you, every one of our buildings knows where they're supposed to go, can do it in under 2 minutes, and they practice it. It's just ingrained in our culture because we live in the Midwest, and that might happen. So the idea that our schools and our communities know how to respond like that in a practiced fashion, just in case it does happen. We are very trauma sensitive to how we respond to our students, and that we have a plan and we practice that plan, and it's talked about. And that is actually brought up inside the plan. That's one of the big changes that you're going to see moving forward. That is a part of every action, the database decision making, so that's something that you should see moving forward. It's mandatory.
Karen.
I realize we no longer get a vote on the report, but I know that early on, TJ, as you took over, many of the cabinet members put many hours into putting down the evidence and the data that the state was looking for to begin with. So has that report been turned into the state?
That's a very good question. And so the tabs along the bottom of that report, the October and November and December have been added into there. And we're going to begin working to put together the October report. And so when we go and do that report at the state board meeting, the plan is to share that with you guys before we go up there. We recently had a sit down to review exactly, okay, what would go into this slide, what should we use as evidence and things of that nature. And so that's something that we're doing to move forward the reporting. So we're going to continue. We're going to hold with August and September that we've put in there, and now our specifically directed actions with Shane and Bill Decker. We have evidence, like example of a piece of evidence for your board training will be this calendar right here and the dates that we met. So that's actual evidence that will be linked in there. We are continuing with that, and that is how in the future how we will report, do a status report for you as well.
So we are making progress on other areas, not just the crisis intervention.
Absolutely, but that is number one. That is our number one focus right now, and we are working on our HR evaluations. All of those are 100% complete. Things like that we're continuing to.
So we are giving the state the data that says, look, we have addressed these other things.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Director Snyder.
Kind of tailing off of Dan's question where, he asked, are we making progress? I heard a lot of I feels and things like that to where within the district, but have you received any feedback from the state where we're at in their eyes?
So on the Monday and Friday meetings that Bill and myself have with Dr. Lebo and Amy Williamson, we have to update everything that we've accomplished that week. So when I say I feel or I think, the things that we are rolling out are plans and getting plans established and attaching people's names to those plans, the action's actually coming very soon. So a specific action would be, we've established the board calendar and the board training and what the board training will look like, as you're going to hear here very shortly. but there hasn't been a board training yet. We have established a finance committee and we're working on a line item budget, but what that is exactly, we haven't been able to share it with you yet. So that's why you might have hinted hesitation to me, because that is exactly what we need to start doing. We're on the cusp of having all of that action occur. Up to this point, we've been doing a lot of planning, putting documents down, establishing new routines and structures. So that's where you sensed a little bit of hesitation, is particularly from me. I know there's been a ton of work, and I know we're heading in the right direction. But in terms of what have you got accomplished, I would say that all of our plans are set to enact. That's kind of probably the hesitation that you sense.
Well, when I say accomplished, I mean, are we where the state wants us to be right now? I'm not saying with anything enacted, even in the planning process, are we meeting their satisfaction as far as our progress?
I'll have to ask Bill. Bill, would you mind coming up and helping answer this question?
So as TJ said, on every Monday and every Friday, it's Shane, myself, TJ, Amy Williamson, and Lebo, Dr. Lebo, the director, that meet. On Fridays, it's kind of how did the week go, and on Monday, it's kind of marching orders for that week. We have had very productive conversations. We've had great interaction. So as far as anything informal writing of saying, yep, you guys have checked that off, you've checked that off, no, we haven't had that. But I believe that Shane would back this up. I think TJ would back it up. We've gotten very good supportive dialogue of this is what's happened this week. Okay, that's good. That's where we need to be. This is what you're going to do during this week. Do you think you can do that? Yeah, we can do that. We're going to do this, this, this. Okay, that sounds good. And so we're not to that formal piece yet, but we're not going to be too far away from that, because as we get closer to both an SBRC meeting that's upcoming, as well as State Board of Education meeting that will be upcoming, SBRC in December, State Board of Education in November, we're going to get some more direct feedback as we get close to those. But I believe that my own opinion is we have been very productive. And it feels like we've done a lot of work. And when you think back about the time that we've been doing this, it's not very long. And so my own opinion, we're doing well, and the feedback that we've gotten from those two folks has been very positive.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move to an overview of board professional development schedule. Is Ms. Schneider, are you on the line?
Hi, yes. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. So hope everybody's having a good evening. I'm Siobhan Schneider, Policy and Legal Services Director for Iowa Association of School Boards. And I was asked by my team here to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of the what we've put together for as a Davenport IASB Board Professional Development Schedule. And I don't have a clear view of it, but hopefully, Mary, do you have that document up on the screen for the board members, or do they have access to it?
I believe we all have a hard copy.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. So what you're looking at on this schedule is the result of some planning meetings that we did internally and also with Bill and TJ and Bruce and Dan to basically put together a framework for what board trainings will look like for the Davenport board. So you can see there are two different types of highlighting here. The yellow is the regular meetings, and the gray is the committee of the whole meeting. And essentially what we're looking to do is have a regular schedule of board development sessions that are about an hour, 2 hours in length. Kind of depends on what your committee of the whole meetings look like already for that agenda. And this will be training that is led by IASB, and it's going to be designed for different topic areas. And those topic areas should focus in on areas that are responsive to Davenport's corrective action plan, like crisis response and violence prevention and that type of thing. And so we'll go through the training during the COW meeting, and then also just learning about that content area in particular. And that can involve IASB directors. It could also include your district staff and other third-party content area experts if needed, and of course the AEA content area experts. And then we're going to put together basically sort of a progress report for what we would like to see or what the goals are for the board to be able to analyze that information at an upcoming meeting. So the structure will go, we work with you guys closely on a particular topic at the COW meeting, and then at the next upcoming regular meeting, you'll have one of our staff members or potentially someone from the AEA on hand to help you with applying that board development. So you guys would then, you'd be in the driver's seat and you'd go through the topic area, the review for that evening as part of your meeting. And then you would be able to apply some of the training that we've done, ask particular questions, things like that. And then we would be on hand for just a brief refresh at the end and reflection to say, okay, how did this work? Did the questions that we came up with and the analysis that we came up with, did it apply for this situation, that kind of thing. And then it will help us as a launch pad for the next topic and the next set. So that is the structure that we're looking at here.
Are there any questions, comments from the board? Director Beck.
Hi, Siobhan. This is Allison Beck. So when it's the committee of the whole, is that the entire committee of the whole meeting is dedicated to a topic that involves database decision-making? We'll learn and then we prepare? Is that how I'm understanding these?
So that is a great question. And my understanding from talking with everybody was that we would need to allow time for you guys to still be able to utilize your committee of the whole meeting or committee of the whole meetings for the additional topics that you need board development on that are not related to this. So that's why we said that the COW meetings, we may be working with you for an hour or we may be working with you for 2 hours, sort of depending on what's appropriate for that particular agenda.
Okay, and so each time we work with you in a COW meeting, though, it'll have each of those 3 bullet points. Is that correct?
That is the intention.
Okay, thank you.
Director Foster.
With these meetings, will there be any overlap with what's going to be presented at the IASB annual convention?
That's a great question.
My question is, do we sign up for the convention, or are we going to see some of the same materials at our meetings?
Well, thank you very much for asking the question, Director Poston. It's a loaded question because since I work for IASB, I would tell you, you should sign up for all of it. But to be more specific to answer your question, I would say that the purpose and the intention of this board training is to be very specific to your district, to the needs of Davenport, and to be responsive to the corrective action plan that you have in place. So it would be very appropriate for that. The IASB annual convention is going to have 20 different education sessions going on, and they will be a little more generalized. They won't be as specific to your district, but they will cover a lot of the topics that you guys will be covering because these are concerns throughout the state.
Thank you.
Siobhan, do you care if I give one quick little side note to that?
Oh, please do.
You know, it's interesting to make a comment like this because this is such a different conference, but I would assume that the content of the conference, even though it's a virtual conference, won't be significantly different than a normal conference. And in a normal conference, what you would see are presentations from districts across the state. And basically, it's a presentation that's given by a district board and administrative team that have done something well enough for the IASB to believe that that's worth learning to other people. And I think there would be a high correlation between the board actions that you would be able to see in attending IASB sessions and what you will then, Mike's got me twice already, I'll try to keep getting it further away, sorry. And what we would be covering here at this table. So I would highly recommend both, and I don't work for IASB.
Bruce, could I address, I sent an email to Dan and Bruce, and, you know, there are some budget issues that we need to address, and it's about a $1,400 cost for us to go to the IASB. And my position was, you know, $1,400 in the big scheme of things is probably not a big deal, but if we're getting all this training here locally, I think the board ought to be fiscally responsible as well and take a step back and say, perhaps this year, with it being virtual and with all the training we're going to get, that we don't sign up to do our part in help cutting the budget.
That might be a question that would be worth TJ and myself bringing up at one of our Monday or Friday meetings to get some direction from the Board of Education. The Department of Education. I think, you know, you would want to be sure that that was viewed in the right way, where it didn't become known that there were no board members from Davenport that attended the IASB conference and have that taken in a way that would be negative. So I think we could bring that up and maybe bring some advice back to you.
Do we know what the costs will be for us on this?
There are not costs with this, aside from just very, very basic costs of IASB, some travel time and expenses if they're going to be here in person, but very minimal costs.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Director Beck.
So first of all, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I've been on the board for 3 years and we didn't get anything like this when I first started. So 2 questions. Number 1, are we going to be able to, I mean, it's a lot of information and I appreciate the fact that we're going to have some practice out of it. Are there things that are easily sort of, I don't know, packaged into a handbook or a PowerPoint or something like that that we can refer back to and then potentially use in the next, you know, when new board members come on and we have a chance to, you know, they need to be onboarded in all of this training as well. Are there going to be sort of some little things that we can use as refreshers and sustainability, I guess is the word I'm looking for?
Director Beck, I can try and field that one. It's pretty common practice for IASB during the course of workshops to, if we think that certain documents or forms would be valuable as future teaching for districts, to go ahead and include those as deliverables, as something that we, share with the board so that they can apply it in future settings. So that would be pretty common practice for our workshops.
Perfect. Thank you, Siobhan.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move-
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you. We'll do the board requests. We have two. One from Director Snyder. It's listed as an agenda item. Due to the spending freeze, teachers have expressed concerns that they can't make photocopies for needed classroom materials, as an example. Also, after school, tutoring has been canceled, and that's concerning for student achievement. Why are you making the request? Are there other cuts that could be made that aren't directly tied to the classroom, that wouldn't tie the hands of our hardworking teachers? Is this a agenda item really, or is it an information request?
I'd like it on the, I guess it's an agenda item to be a discussion.
A discussion item, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, agenda. This board request from Director Gosa. Agenda item, description of the request. I would like for the board to have a monthly report from the Equity Committee. Why are you making the request? This is important for the board to be actively involved in this, as well as have the members of committees we actively have, and at what buildings, and feedback as to responsiveness of building staff. When would you like this? We'll bring it to the agenda committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Hayes. There are any administrative reports? There are no administrative reports. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned.